Hello, Edgy Rock Stars, and welcome back to Miss Shipley's Classroom. And today we are going to be talking about something that, I don't know about you, but it kind of makes my head spin when I think about it. Differentiation, accommodation, modification. What does it all mean? Today we're going to break down each one so that you can implement them successfully in your classroom. Stay tuned. Teachers, and welcome back to Miss Shipley's Classroom. I am Farah, and I strive each week to bring you tips and strategies that are going to be actionable for you to take into your classroom and make your teacher life a little easier. But before we jump into today's content, I want to give a huge shout out to those of you that are just joining us for the first time, and be sure and comment down below and let me know where you're tuning in from and what grade level you teach. So today we are going to be talking about differentiation, accommodation, modification. Man, it's enough to make your head spin, but hopefully today's video is going to break those three different things down for you to be able to go back into your classroom and know exactly how to implement each one and have a better handle on some of those IEPs and know what you should be doing for students who have one of these three things that they need in their instruction. So let's look first at the word differentiation. So when I think about the word differentiation, differentiation has the word in it different, because your students, let's face it, are all different. And differentiation in the things that you do in your classroom, whether it be in your lessons or in the different modalities that somebody learns something, those are going to be based on the students that you have in your classroom at that particular time. Now, different can mean in their learning styles, in their learning paths, if they're on a different learning level than their students. So different things that you do with your students. I like to think about differentiation as an individual learning plan. So if I have a group of first graders or second graders, third graders that have different reading levels, when I start breaking them into their small groups for, say, guided reading, that would be differentiation, because I am providing instruction on the same content, but I'm making sure that it's leveled at wherever they need that content delivered to them. So think about when you teach on an everyday basis, all of your students should be getting some form of differentiation within their instruction. This is something we give to all students. Now, accommodations. Accommodations are provided by you, the teacher, and those accommodations are often laid out in something like an IEP, and they actually change how the student learns the material. For example, if you have a student that struggles with reading, you might provide them with a recording of the story, especially if they are needing to, they're working more on, finding evidence and things like that in the story, and not so much being able to comprehend necessarily what they read. But accommodation is, you might give it to them in oral format. Another way that you could do an accommodation is when you're giving a test, you could provide them with a word bank to choose from. For example, if you're giving a vocabulary test and you're giving the definitions, well, maybe the regular test is the definition and the student has to recall what word goes with that, but an accommodation might mean that this particular student gets a word bank to choose from. So those are accommodations, and those are based on how the student is going to learn the material or be tested over the material. Extra time is another accommodation that you might give your students as well. Let's kind of step back. Differentiation versus accommodation. Differentiation is something you should be doing with all of your students based on their levels of learning and where they're at, making sure that the content is delivered to them at their level. Accommodation is something that you're usually going to see within an IEP plan or some other accommodate. Now, I know most of the schools that I taught in, accommodations could not be given on certain things without it being placed in their IEP plan, especially when it came to the way that they learned material, how they learned something throughout the year. I wanted to make sure that if that's the way they'd been learning it all year, then we did something formal to get it into an IEP plan so that they would have those accommodations on their assessments as well, especially those state assessments. So now let's move into modification. Modification is a change in that learning plan, and I'm actually going to read to you a definition that I found that just really struck a chord with me. It says modification is a change in what a student should learn and how they learn it. So let that sink in. A modification is a change in what they should learn and how they're going to learn it. For example, students who are struggling to keep up with a lesson may need to have their instructional time changed. Maybe they need to be learning math in the morning instead of the afternoon. Maybe they need to have, if they're struggling with spelling words, maybe they need to have a different spelling list as opposed to the spelling list that the other students have. Now, I can understand why this can get confusing. For example, when I think of something as simple as spelling. So if I'm differentiating my spelling in my classroom, maybe my students are working on CVCE words, okay? So maybe they're working on CVCE words. A differentiation would mean that all students are working on CVCE words, but maybe they're getting a different level of CVCE words based on where their spelling is. So one of the things that I used to do in my classroom was I did differentiated spelling, where I would be teaching, or that particular week might be CVCE words, but based on the pretest of words, which was a basic grade level set of words based on a pretest, if they scored a 90 or higher, then they actually got a different list of words for their week that were actually harder CVCE words. Same skill, everybody was getting the same skill, however, they were getting it on their level. I wanted to make sure that I was pushing my more advanced students to do harder words or to learn how to spell harder words. But again, same skill, CVCE words. Accommodation would mean that on those CVCE words, for example, maybe that spelling list, if I have a student with an accommodation, maybe they're getting, for example, they're getting the word list or they're getting their spelling list, but on their test, they're only tested over 5 of those words as opposed to the entire list of 10. That's an accommodation. Now, a modification would be I have student A and student B, or I have I have my entire classroom, and then I have student A who is not on grade level and is not going to be working on CVCE words because they are still struggling with CVC words. So a modification would mean the rest of the class is doing CVCE words while this student has in their IEP plan to modify what they're learning and how they're learning down to a lower level. Okay. Now, I'm not just saying that modifications have to be modified down lower. Typically, that's what modifications are used for. So hopefully you can see the difference in these. Differentiation, everybody's getting the same thing just on their level. Accommodation, everybody's getting the same thing, but this student is maybe getting some extra help with that particular standard and the way they're learning it or on their testing. Modification is you have a student in your classroom and they're not on grade level and they're not ready to do the work the rest of the class is doing, so we're going to modify what they're learning so that we can make sure that those foundational blocks are there before moving on to the content that's at grade level with the rest of the students. So I hope that this helped clear this up. Be sure and leave any questions down below that you might have or any further tips and strategies for this that you might want to share. I love hearing from you each week. Also, make sure if you are interested in having an on-site professional development, you can jump over to mrsshipley.com/shake up your teaching, and you could find out some more information about having me come to your campus to share classroom management and different lesson design and delivery strategies that I've used over the course of my career in the classroom. Don't forget to like and or subscribe to Miss Shipley's Classroom. Make sure that you turn your notifications off so that you get notified anytime I go live or upload a new video. Also, make sure you go back through the archive of videos and find any other tips and strategies that you might be able to take into your classroom tomorrow. Keep being educational rock stars, and I will catch you same time, same place next week. Bye, guys.